All right, let's start our next lecture by talking about the Renaissance. Now, the Renaissance, we can trace its origins most likely to when the Crusades happened in Europe, and even maybe before the Crusades. But the Crusades had a huge effect. Now, what happened during the Crusades is that it had a huge effect on commerce or trade. Because so many Europeans were traveling to cities of the Muslim world like Damascus, Mosul, Alexandria, and Cairo, that a lot of these ideas and products came back with these people. And one of the big spots where they came, if we look at geography, would be Italy. And again, Italy is the country shaped like a boot in the Mediterranean. It's pretty close to where the Muslim world was, so many of the Italians were the first ones to get these products, which they would have said were from the Orient, or from much of the Muslim world in China. That would include products like silk, precious stones, perfumes, spices was a big one, pearls, ivory, which were able to come back into the Italian cities and allowed them to grow. So we see a economic growth begins in Europe with the return of these people, and a lot of these people thinking, well, how about I start selling this stuff back home? And businesses start forming. So there becomes a big trade between the East and West as the Europeans desire more of these products. Spices, again, was the one desired most to add flavor to the food, to help preserve it, among many other things. They learned that spices such as pepper and cinnamon can preserve meat, can add flavor to meats that were going rotten or bad. Spices become pretty much, especially amongst the upper class, become more in demand and have become more expensive, so people are willing to travel great lengths to bring spice back. So many of these families and their wealth play an important role. When these people come back, these traders come back, they also bring ideas which will spark the Renaissance. So let's focus on one of these cities in Italy. We're going to focus on the city of Florence. So the wealthy merchant families of Italy played a huge role in promoting the Renaissance. These worldly and materialistic peoples, they would travel around the world, and they liked their goods, they were materialistic. Individuals used their wealth to sponsor new cultural activities. They financed the study of many classical works. In doing so, they glorified themselves because they were the ones to put it on. They were like the promoters. So if you were a rich person, one of the things you could do to gain status in your community would be to sponsor an artist, for example. But they fueled intellectual and artistic growth throughout all of Europe. So again, let's look at why Italy was so big. In northern Italy, it was different than a lot of Europe was during the High Middle Ages. For example, in Italy, there were a lot of large city-states where, for the most part, the rest of Europe was rural. And then these cities became an exchange of ideas that could happen very easily. Also, in addition to that, the bubonic plague was really bad in Italy. In a lot of Italian city-states, up to 60% of the population could be killed. Now, as we talked about the bubonic plague lecture, what would happen is as people died, there were less workers, and the workers who remained could actually demand more money for their labor. So there's fewer people, you can demand more money, so the average person started getting more money. And then trade expansion allowed a development of a rich middle class. Now, when we looked at the feudalism structure of the Middle Age of Europe, we saw it was like a triangle. You had your emperor up on the top, and then you had your rich nobles, and their knights were underneath it. And we talked in the High Middle Ages, there was developing this business class of people who would trade goods back and forth. Well, in the Italian city-states, the cities grow, and the cities bring in more merchants, more people who are traveling back and forth, large parts of the Muslim world to bring in goods. And they start developing businesses, and they become powerful, and they hire people. And they can pretty much challenge the nobles who are in this European society, and it kind of turns the society on its head, or it turns it around. You're no longer just valued because of your birth and how you were born. You're valued because of what you can do. So let's look at individual achievement. Individual achievement would be the big thing in the Renaissance. It's like you can become a self-made man, for example, a self-made woman, a self-made person. That becomes valued. not just you're born with a title and you keep that title for your life, but you can become, rich by being a good businessman and working hard and being creative and getting a few breaks. So individual achievement is very valued in the Renaissance. And it's not a coincidence that these business people who value individual achievement identify with great artists. They identify with great artists like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. They identify with great scientists later on like Galileo, who we'll talk about, Burlesque, and other artists. So they identify with them, and to promote themselves, they sponsor these artists. The Medici family, who sponsors a large part of the Renaissance in Florence and kind of rule the city almost like kings. They have no official title, but they're pretty much ruling the city. They have a very powerful bank. And what they do is they sponsor a lot of artists. They sponsor Michelangelo when he's young and throughout his whole life. They sponsor many people because it's kind of like, well, we put these artists up. We're the ones who sponsored them. They're the ones who promote them. And it's a sign of status that they can have them. And they also value these artists because, like themselves, they're people who, they value individual achievement. They value the fact that they're able to get things done by themselves. They're able to create something new. Now, the city of Florence was actually a republic since 1200. It was a republic, which is rare in Europe at that time. Now, I mentioned the Medici family. The Medici family takes power. And they take power because they're very, very good merchants and they're very good business people. They basically become the dictators of Florence. We're going to watch a video on Lorenzo Medici, but there are many in the family who rule the city for hundreds of years. They become extremely wealthy and they become extremely powerful. So powerful that they're able to produce popes. A number of popes they're able to produce. They're able to get in with the church, put people into religion, have them become priests, have them rise up, and they're able to make popes. I'm not making this up. They even take a person who is a pirate. Literally, he's a pirate. He was robbing ships. And they're able to put him up to the ranks of church and make him into a pope. That's how powerful the Medici family was in Florence, and they had strong ties to the church. They even produced 2 queens of France, and they are a powerful family in Florence, which is kind of like the city of the Renaissance where all these artists and everything take off. Okay, so if I'm going to define the Renaissance, if you want to put like a, what would you call it? I would call it the rebirth. You'd call it the rebirth because it becomes a rebirth of knowledge in places like Italy, which did have the Roman Empire, obviously, but it becomes a rebirth of knowledge. They value the knowledge that comes from, the Greeks, and they try to improve upon it. Like we talked about St. Thomas Aquinas, who gets brought back. And things get brought back like reading the Greek works, reading Aristotle. Now, to be fair, they're reading it again, but they're also influencing the Muslim societies who were reading these works for hundreds of years when, the Europeans wouldn't. The Renaissance lasted between 1350 and 1550 AD. That's a ballpark figure, that's an estimate. We don't know, there's not an exact date that the Renaissance starts. These things, history doesn't work like that. So about 350 to 1550 AD is the period of the Renaissance. And it brings important changes for Italy in nearly all aspects of life. And importantly, it's a period of innovation and discovery. All right, it brings life and culture, especially valuing classical Greece and Rome, values individual achievement. Creativity in this life becomes important. Humanism is talked about during this time period. Humanism, believing that humans can achieve anything, is very important in the Renaissance. This idea of humanism, that we should, value humanity, value today. You can value achieving things and getting things done in this life. In the Middle Ages, it was more of the mindset that, just get through this life and get to heaven. Where now it's like, well, no, if God gave me a talent, maybe a way to praise God is to use my talent. If I can paint, for example, one way to use my talent is to paint and use it and show what God gave me. That is humanism. That becomes a very important value in the Renaissance as well. Okay, now let's shift our focus from Europe, and we're going to go to China for a little bit, and we're going to talk about Chinese maritime trade. in the Indian Ocean basin, how this expands, and this will too also influence how goods are made. And I want you to take a look at these ships here. There's a man called Zheng He, who is very important in history and just recently has been rediscovered. Then you got Columbus. We got these two ships on here. So we're going to talk about Zheng He and who he was. All right, so let's start and let's talk about the Ming Dynasty. And the Ming Dynasty follows after the Mongols have taken over China, the Yang Dynasty, following the Yang Dynasty. All right, so China was the power in the 1400s, and they were interested in trade, but they didn't want many foreign people in China. They had a deep mistrust for foreign people, especially since the Mongols took them over. They traded pearls, gems, spices, things like tortoise shells for silk, porcelain, manufactured goods. And they renovated their navy, allowing merchants to travel to Japan and Southeast Asia. Now, the person who comes in big into this trade is Zheng He. Zheng He was an eunuch, which means wasn't going to have kids. I'll just leave it at that. He was an admiral. He was actually a Muslim who was a trusted advisor of the emperor. The Emperor Yongle organized expeditions to go out into the Indian Ocean basin, all the way into Africa, into Malaysia, India. And he wanted to impose imperial control of foreign trade with China and to impress foreign people with the power of the Ming Dynasty. So what they did is they took these ships, they were called the treasure fleets, and it took place from 1405 to 1433. The first three were in Southeast Asia, India, then they went on to the Persian Gulf and Arabia, expeditions again in East Africa, all the way to Kenya, up to the areas with, Great Zimbabwe, Kilwa. The fleet consisted of 317 ships, 28,000 armored troops. If you would have put Columbus's ships, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Marina, they would have been small little ships among this treasure fleet. These treasure ships were massive. They had 4 decks and could hold 500 passengers each. On these voyages, Zheng He brought Chinese silk, porcelain, other goods. He received other riches. They even brought back some things that they wanted to bring back to China, like zebras and giraffes, back to China. And it was also a way, just again, to impose and show the sheer power of the Ming Dynasty. Zheng He was hardly ever threatened because of the sheer size of the treasure fleet. If they were, they would not stand down, and they would show strength to anyone who, didn't want to trade with them. If anyone, tried to, attack them, it probably didn't happen, but they could take them out real easily. And these 7 expeditions established a strong presence in the Indian Ocean and offered many gifts that were brought back to the Ming Dynasty court. We're going to watch a short video on these ships. Again, it's linked here, and I'll put it on the bottom of the YouTube page, along with the Medici family one. But during the 1430s, these expeditions just ended on these huge ships. If they would have kept going, there are some people believe they did make it to the Americas. Other people believe that if they would have kept going, since these ships were so much better than what the Portuguese and Spanish had later, that the Chinese possibly could have discovered and gone to America, and that would have changed all of history. But suddenly in the 1430s, these expeditions ended. The Confucian ministers argued that the resources that were used in these expeditions would be better used in agriculture and farming. And also, the Mongols still were a threat, so it was seen that they should put the expeditions into defense and agriculture, and they ended them. They actually destroyed the ships, quit making them, and we actually lost record in history of these ships even being made for a long time. But the thing is, these ships could have crossed the Atlantic. They were big enough to, or the Pacific to get to the Americas. And had that happened, history would be totally different, as we'll learn what happens when the Spanish and Portuguese go to the Americas. We might be speaking Chinese at this point right now. All right, and we'll end it right there.